good. Okay.
Okay, we good to go?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many of you here today. I know there's another couple to join us who will catch in. I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Harper and I'm head of the coaching team here at Stay Nimble. I'm not surprised today's webinar has been so popular, as the question, what do I include in my CV, is probably one of the most common questions that we as coaches get asked by members and clients who we work with. The CV is often your first introduction to an employer, so it plays an absolutely vital role. Obviously, when you get past the application stage, you're then faced with the interview, and that raises another whole set of questions, which hopefully we're going to address today. So the Stay Nimble Career Advice Hub, as many of you will already be aware, has lots and lots of articles, videos, and even CV templates that are available for you to use. However, we're hoping that today's webinar will also help answer a few of your extra questions and give you some tools needed to start preparing for your job applications and your interviews. So for those of you who are new to Stay Nimble, you're very welcome to join us today. Just a little bit of background. Stay Nimble is a social enterprise career development platform, and we're helping thousands of people across the UK to develop a better understanding of their personal strengths and skills, and most importantly, their transferable skills, with a view to obtaining employment in a sector that they absolutely love. As well as the Career Advice Hub, we have the Learning Hub, where you can access hundreds of free courses where you can learn new skills. And in addition, we obviously have our team of fully qualified and registered career coaches with whom you can work on a one-to-one basis. We're fortunate to have one of our career coaches, Caroline Jones, with us here today. She's giving us a wave there, and she may be familiar to some of you. But before we move on to our speakers, I would just like to cover a few basic housekeeping rules for today's webinar. So we're going to have the two presentations, one from Caroline and the second from Suzanne Clark. So while both are speaking, can I just please ask, as Lucy's already done, if we can keep our mics on mute during this time. We will be having a question and answer session after Suzanne's presentation, and if you would like to ask any questions, then please add them into the chat facility at the bottom of the screen. Lucy Guest, who works with Stay Nimble in marketing, is also with us today, as you know, and she will be monitoring the questions as they come through, and we'll get to all of those questions at the end of this session. And lastly, as you've been made aware, that the webinar is being recorded, so I understand that not everybody will be comfortable with their camera on, so you're more than welcome to switch your camera off if that's what you prefer. It's not a problem at all. So just a quick look at the agenda of what we'll be covering today. There we go. In a moment, I'll ask both Caroline and Suzanne to introduce themselves. Then we will be hearing from Caroline first, who will talk about the purpose of the CV, how to match your CV to a job advert, and importantly, what not to include as well. She will then move on to general tips on how to prepare your questions and answers for interview. We'll then be hearing from Suzanne, who has many years' experience as a business coach, employer, and as a recruiter as well. So Suzanne will be giving us a really important insight into what the employer is looking for in your application and how you can make your application stand out. In addition, she's going to focus on how you can demonstrate that you're the right candidate for the post. So there's quite a lot to be covering today. All of this will be followed by your questions with that question and answer session as well. So let's get going. Caroline, first of all, can I please ask you to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I'm Caroline Jones. I'm a professional career coach with Stay Nimble. I've worked with Stay Nimble for nearly a year. Previous to that, I ran my own recruitment business for over 20 years. And previous to that, I worked for various big recruitment companies, both in London and regionally.
Great stuff. Thank you, Caroline. And Suzanne?
Hi, I'm Suzanne Clark. I spent 30 years as an IT recruiter. Prior to that, I was a software developer, a bit of a geek. I've got a degree in mathematical sciences, makes me even more of a geek. But I have interviewed thousands and thousands of candidates over the last 30 years. And also my partner is an HR director, so I'm constantly involved in, you know, recruitment and sharing his challenges as he goes along the way. So yeah, lots and lots of stories, and hopefully I can help in lots of ways around the interview side.
Excellent, good stuff, Suzanne. Thank you for that. Okay, so get the next slide, Lucy. Thank you for the next steps. Just a very, very quick note about what will be happening following the webinar as well. If we run out of time today, because we do have 1 full hour, and if we don't get to all of the questions that have been asked, we will be providing a written answer for you. And Lucy will also be preparing an ebook with various resources from this session that will be distributed later as well. Obviously, the recording of this webinar will also be available for you to listen to again as a resource on the Stay Nimble platform as well. So let's get going. Caroline, down to you.
Hi again. So as I said, I am a career coach at Stay Nimble, and I'm going to talk through, first of all about what makes a great CV. Lucy, can I have the next slide? Thank you. So what is a great CV? I personally think a great CV is where it has got a really powerful summary profile to start you off, so you know where you're wanting to go. And this needs to be tailored for each time you're looking to apply for different jobs. Ideally spotlighting your key skills that you're wanting the employer to look at, emphasising your successes rather than your responsibilities. Sometimes it's really important to say what you've been responsible for in certain types of careers, but if you can then link that with a success that's related to it, it makes it even stronger. We're then going to talk about the sort of traditional and a functional or a combination CV, which I'm going to go into more detail so you get an idea of what it looks like. But also what's really important about a great CV is that it looks professional. Now, this can really vary depending on what sort of role you're applying for. If you're going for a very marketing graphic role, you might have a very creative CV. Well, if you're going for a very techie role, it might be very skill focused. If you're going for a marketing or a sales role, it might be very success focused. So professional in the light of where you're going. And also in the size that we can see it. So like an 11 plus would be great. So now this is what you can see in front of you at the moment is an example of a traditional CV. And there are some really key points to making this a successful CV. First of all, you've got your career objective. That can be career objective, that can be career summary, that can be profile, doesn't matter what it's called. And that should be the key bits that you're really wanting to be scanned by an HR person or a recruiter of what you're really looking for. Big mistake I've seen in here is where people have put that they're looking to be a marketing coordinator and they've actually just applied for an office coordinator. And instantly that CV will potentially not be looked at because someone will say, well, that isn't what this role is. So really important to make sure it mirrors the job. Then going through, you want your most latest experience at the top. So what you've most recently done. Now on the CV, this lady has worked and then she's got her education at the bottom. Big question people ask is, should my education be at the top or at the bottom? If your experience, your work experience is stronger than your education, then your work experience should be at the top. If you've just graduated or you've done some study that is really important to where you're wanting to go, then put your education at the top. And then you've got your additional skills, which again, depending on how important they are to the role, depend on where they are on the CV. Have the next slide, Lucy, thank you. Next, we've got the change in direction, and we call it in career coaching sort of a functional CV. And this is a combination of both. So what you've got here, and Cora's story is that she's been in sales and she wants to go into marketing. So she's using keywords in her summary and her key strengths to highlight her transferable skills. And then on her career history, just like you saw in the traditional CV, they've used bullet points to then show the skills of what they've done in those roles, which is a brilliant way for scan reading and is a much quicker way of being able to present a lot of information. Probably the biggest thing I just want to pull out on here to you all, though, is the fact that because she's looking to get from being a salesperson into marketing, the words that she's been able to use in here, and even bolding words to make it stand out, to make someone see, oh, she could do marketing, is really clever. And this is something that a lot of people, particularly during COVID, have had to look at, how you're going to change from what you've been doing that maybe there aren't roles into to where you're going to. And this CV is just absolutely brilliant at playing this out for you. Thanks, Lucy. Right, so hopefully now we've got the template for a really, really good CV. Now we're going to look at looking at job adverts and how you're going to go about making sure your CV really mirrors them. So the first thing is looking at what the job specs are requiring and thinking, have I got those skills? And I really, I've got it here, my yellow highlighter. I always think if you're going to print it off, highlight it, or use it on the computer and highlight it, the keywords. What are the essentials? What are the desirables? What do they really need me to show that I've got? Is this in my CV? Brilliant. If it's not, can I add it? Or do I need to make sure it's in my summary to make it even stronger? Then I need to look at my CV and mirror it and make sure I've really mirrored it really well. Is my tone, is my style, is my vocab similar to this job? So have they produced a really sharp and snappy advert and I've got a 3-page CV? Do I need to slim it down so I'm more in line with what that company culture and style is? What tone have they used? Are they very professional? Do I need to be really professional? Am I... all those different areas that you can pick up just to tidy it up and make it just closer to the match. Then my big thing here is looking at, are there areas that have been covered in this job spec that I can do, but I just haven't thought to include, and making sure I've added that in. And then really double checking that summary. So is that summary really matching well the job specification? And then lastly, recapping, going through that job spec one more time, going through your CV one more time, and making sure that you've got everything ready to send. Next slide, please, Lucy. Thanks. Right, the pitfalls. The biggest one is things like spelling mistakes, bad layout, bad grammar, and like I said about the summaries with wrong information or dates that are all a bit confused. Get somebody to look at it for you before you send it. Just another eye can pick up on some really silly mistakes that we, if I'm honest, we all make. More and more, in the old days, 10 years ago, if you didn't tailor your CV or mirror your CV to the job spec, I would say a lot of times you would get an interview if you had similar-ish skills. Now, because the market is much harder, I would say that without tailoring it or mirroring it, I think it's much harder now to get an interview. If you've got employment gaps on your CV, for any reason you've gone off traveling, you've done some volunteering, you've looked after somebody, or you've needed to reskill, put something in about that. You can put it in the summary, or you could use it in the gap to actually say studied. And especially during COVID, please really don't worry. Lots of people have been unemployed for quite a long time because of the crisis. So I think please don't sort of really sweat that. It is what it is. If you have done some training or you've done something that you can put in there, then brilliant. Don't start your CV with your job history. Always start it with a summary and profile. Give the person who's reading your CV a chance to really get to know who you are first before they go down into the history. My next issue would be really careful with jargon. Some organisations use loads of jargon and you think that everybody else knows the jargon, and then you go put it on your CV and everyone's asking you questions and you're like, oh, don't you know this? And the thing is, it can be really off-putting for an HR or recruiter because they're like, I don't get this, I don't get this. So do be really careful about jargon. Also, don't be vague. If you did it, blow your trumpet, you did it. If you didn't do it and you did it as a team, say you did it as a team, but just don't be vague, don't be wishy-washy about it. And lastly, you don't need to have your whole address on your CV anymore, just your area or your postcode. We don't really do photos in the UK. I know other countries do photos. We don't really do photos, and definitely no dates of birth or national insurance or bank details or anything that anybody could get hold of and make be a useful information for them. And lastly, not too many interests. Sometimes I've seen CVs where someone's written like 2 paragraphs on their interests. That's great, but not on your CV. Next slide, please, Lucy. Thanks. Right, so we're in a good place. We've now looked at your CV, we looked at where we're going, and now we've got that interview coming up, and it's going to be a Zoom or a Teams. And I know from talking to people, sometimes this can be quite frightening, and also haven't used the technology, not sure. So here's some really quick, easy tips just to kind of get you in the right place. First of all, choose a room with a very blank background. I've been with people who have had guinea pigs, or someone had a big poster up right behind me when it's really off-putting. So try and keep a blank wall. Be professional in your attire. I'm not saying sit there as a chap in suit and tie. I think a nice shirt would be absolutely fine, but not sort of a slogan t-shirt or a hoodie or anything like that. Practice your video conferencing, ideally with a friend. I would really recommend having a go and just making sure that your equipment's working and that you can see where you're sitting. Make sure your computer's kind of downloaded all that software before you're about to do the call. And really think about your body language. So are you smiling? Are you centered the screen? Are you unmuted? All the sorts of very typical things that can all go wrong. Just make sure that you practice that with somebody. Know where your mute button is, especially if you've got a dog or an animal or young children and something goes wrong. Unmute yourself and be able to mute. And then also make sure you've closed down all your other programs. So that's not slowing your computer down, you've got no chimes or anything else going on. Thanks, Lucy. Right, so this is the massive preparation bit for the interview now. This is like getting into the real nitty-gritty of it. So what I've done is I've chosen some key interview questions that seem to come up really regularly at the moment. So one is, tell me about yourself. In the old days, we used to call this elevator pitch, which is literally a statement of what your experience is, what skills you bring, and what personality trait are you going to talk about. Think of yourself going up in an elevator. You have got 30 seconds, a minute to put this across. That's all you need. If someone says, tell you about yourself, and you start running through your whole CV and the interviewer's only got 30 minutes, you could have lost loads of time. So I would always, less is more, and give them the chance to ask you more questions. Next one, why you? This is your chance to give the employer a bit of a, I've done my research and I'm really excited about your organisation. So why you is, well, I see that you do this for charity, and I see that you've been involved in these projects, and I've got this experience, I've got this that I can bring to the team. So why you is, make sure you've done your social media check, make sure you've done your company research, and then you can write a really good why you. Next, tell me about a time when. This is quite regularly used now with something called STAR, so a situation, task, action, result interview question. So a lot of times people get asked questions like, tell me a time when you had a problem with time management, tell me a problem where you've had to delegate, or tell me a time where something's gone wrong. And you've got to think on your feet. So I suggest to people, when they know they've got that interview, go through the job spec and pull everything to pieces on what they could ask you about. Tell me about a time, so that you can feel really comfortable on those questions. We've got quite a lot of resources on Stay Nimble on STAR questions, and also we're really happy to do a coaching session on that because it is quite a big subject on its own. Then strengths-based questions. These are looking at what you really bring to the role. So what are your experiences, what skills, and what personality traits that really mirror this job. But also in strengths, I would say be ready for that weakness question. If someone's gone and asked you strengths, quite often they'll then ask you your weakness. Always remember, a weakness is something that you can show that you've improved on, and you'll never ever go wrong. And lastly on this, motivational questions. These seem to be becoming more and more popular with bigger organisations. So rather than just looking at your skills and experience and making sure you fit that way, they're really looking at your values. So what motivates you? What sort of manager would motivate you? What was your what career step so far has been the most motivational to you? All these things that actually, how much do you fit into this role rather than do you just have the skills? Thanks, Lucy. So now just sort of recapping and making sure we're all in the right place. We've done the research. We've practiced the questions, ideally on Zoom with a friend or with a Stay Nimble coach. You have found out from the person who's found out from the organisation that you're interviewing what is going to be required. Are you going to be tested? What sort of interview is it going to be? Is it going to be more about you, or is it going to be more about the job, or what are they going to throw in? Are they going to do psychometric tests with you? Then you can go and do the next step, which is find out about the interviewer. So you can go onto LinkedIn and do a little research on what this person's previously done, how long they've worked in the company, and maybe you can even find that you've got some connections in common that you could maybe bring up in your interview. And then lastly, take a step before you're going to dive into actually doing the interview. Have you got everything? So have you got in front of you for a Zoom interview, have you got your CV? Have you got the job spec? Have you got the website up? Have you got questions to ask them? Have you got your portfolio ready? Make sure you're all ready. And obviously, if you're not doing a Zoom and you're actually going there, do you know where you're going? And have you given yourself plenty of time to get there? Or have you done a dummy run to make sure you're all good? And then lastly, on my last slide, is all about questions to ask. So in my past life as a recruiter, I used to send sometimes fabulous people for interview. We'd have done everything with them. And then when they actually got to the last bit and they said, oh, do you have any questions? They'd say, oh, no, you've answered everything. And I'd hear back from my client, oh, I really love this person, but they didn't have any questions to ask. And this is really disappointing, because I think it's just that a lot of time people want to know what benefits or what promotion. So what I've done, and after having that feedback, what I did was I used to give people these sorts of questions to have ready, because a lot of the time these won't ever get asked in the question in your interview. So things like, why do you like working here? It's a great way as well to see if the person actually does like working there, because you can see their body language being asked that question. What does success look like in this position? How's it measured? So this gives you an idea. If you're getting appraisals, will you get reviews? How will you get reviewed? You know, now where people are doing more remote working, is it that you're actually going to be interviewed by, is your boss actually going to be in the UK or somewhere where you're not going to see them? So how often are you going to actually get that opportunity to connect in with them? What's the culture like? Asking questions about, you know, do you meet up for coffees? Is there, you know, how does it work? Also things like what's been challenging, what do they see as challenging in the role? But also what do they see that looks good? You know, what represents good to this company? Also things like, what would a 30, 60, 90-day plan look like in this role? Where would I be growing? What would I need to have achieved? What would I need to be trained on? And also lastly, where is the company going? So in 3 years' time, what would the company like to achieve, so that you can feel like you're involved in this journey? I hope that's been really helpful. And I'm now going to pass you over to Suzanne.
Hello. So I'm going to hopefully give you the perspective of what the employer might be thinking when they receive your CV and when you're at interview, etc. So what are they looking for when they see the CV? Most of what I'm saying really backs up everything that, you know, Caroline has just said. What I do like to include or like to see is a covering letter, if possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes it's an online application. But if you're able to include a covering letter, it's showing that employer why you think you're a good fit for the role straight away. If they haven't had many covering letters, it can make you stand out immediately. Do you match the job spec? So the covering letter include areas of, you know, the job spec. Where do you think that you can fulfill what's being asked for? Where do you think that you can add value to the company? Also, when they're looking at the CV, they're saying, do you actually match the job spec? Sometimes I'll have literally a tick box exercise, and they'll be giving you points for how much of the job spec you're actually matching up to. So that's what they're going to be looking for. They're also looking for language that mirrors their own. Again, this might come from looking at the website or from the job spec, but we all feel a bit more familiar if people are using the same sort of language as us. So again, it's quite a clever tactic to use some of the words that you've seen in the job spec or on a website, etc. It's language that they're going to be hearing all day long. So if they see it on your CV or a covering letter, again, it sort of molds you into their environment. They're looking to get a feel for you before they call you for interview. That CV, you might be one of 2, you might be one of 200. So they're looking and going, are they going to fit with us? So it's your place to sell yourself and to really stand out. They may also be looking for what value you can bring to their company. And as an example of this, when I first started in recruitment, I applied for roles as trainee IT recruitment consultant. I'd never done recruitment, I'd never done sales, but I had been in IT for 4 or 5 years. So the immediate value that I brought was that I understood the terminology. I knew what it was like to work in their clients' environments. So even though I had no idea how to do recruitment, I was terrified of picking up the phone to sell. I actually knew the terminology, and it just made me more comfortable and them. So, how has a previous employer been better off for the skills that you've got? What impact have you made somewhere else? You can show these things on your CV, and Caroline very much said this as well, giving examples of successes, things that you've done. How does your experience meet or exceed the job description? And again, as Caroline said, why you? They're looking for what unique skills you might bring, what's different about you, what stands out on your CV. And also they're looking to see if you're a match for their own company values and journey. So have a look at their website, look at what their values are that they say, see if how they match with yours. What do you admire about the company? What are they doing at the moment? Something that you might be able to, perhaps include in your CV. So overall, they're just looking for, right, why should we talk to you? Why should we interview you? What jumps out to us? What makes you different? So, and why does the employer want you to be right for the role? Well, the employer, everyone's so busy. What they don't want to do is they don't want to be wasting their time. You look good on paper. They want you to look good on paper, and they're going, yes, this is somebody that we can get excited about. So they want you to be the person that's going to help them move on with their company objectives. And that's really, everyone's busy. They want to get through the recruitment process. They don't want to be interviewing loads and loads of people. They don't want it to drag on. They just want you to be right. Simple as that. And I sort of say mindset on this bullet point, because, before you go to the interview, please remember that the company does want you to be right for them. Reiterate, they don't want to waste their time. So please sort of maintain a real positive approach to this, that yes, you are the right person, you can be the right person. There's an expression, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. And it's so true. Please don't at any time think, oh, what if they don't want me? What if I'm not quite right? Just believe that you are right from the word go. So remember, the company wants you to be right for them. Think about what you can bring to the role. As Caroline said, make sure that you've thought of examples that you're going to be able to tell them when you get to interview, and be clear on that potential value that you can bring. Just keep going over and over and over in your mind. So by the time you get there, you've thought, yes, I can do this. This is what I can bring to the company. I know that I'm a great fit. I've seen what the organization does. Just be so clear, in your heart, what value you're going to bring. And what ideas do you have from seeing the job spec? You might have thought, oh, if I had that role, I could do this, I could do that. There's some experience or skills or interests you've got that you can bring to the job spec. So, have a think about that. just think about how you can stand out above, the other candidates. Everybody wants the role, but what's different about you? How can you stand out? What can you tell them? And again, repeating what Caroline said a little, why do you want the role? Really sit back and think, why do you want it? You're investing all this time and energy. They're investing time and energy. So why do you want it? And then make sure that, you're ready to tell them. And what interests, do you have, or, community work that you do that might bring, value to the organization as well. And that may come out of things like looking at the website. So that's all before you get to the interview. And again, Caroline, mentioned this too. Nowadays, most people have got a social media presence. Employers will more than likely check you out online. Might be LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I've probably missed some because I'm old and I don't use the other ones, but there's probably some other ones on there that you're on. So make sure your online presence reflects you, the real you, because that's what people are buying into. And so just be careful of getting involved in too many, heated, opinionated debates, swearing, that sort of thing. Sometimes we can get caught in the heat of a moment. Just be mindful of what your online presence looks like. Posting photographs that you wouldn't want somebody, a potential employer to see. I'm not sure I'd want a potential employer to see me in my bikini, for example, but we're all different. But also, and I say this guardedly, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I think gone are the days where, if you had piercings in your face, or I have 4 in each ear, for example, or, if you've got tattoos, etc., it was, cover them up, this, that, and the other. But if that's who you are, then that's who the employer is going to see. Because if you're covering, some tattoos that you absolutely love, or, taking out particular piercings or whatever, and then, you turn up and that's who you want to be when you're at work, that's just not going to be a match. So please just be the real you, because that's who people are going to buy into. But, show yourself in your best light and how you like to be seen. And then again, as Caroline said, feel free to check out the people that are interviewing you as well, because you've got just as much right to see what they're like, what their background is, show an interest, especially on LinkedIn, people can see that you've looked at them. So I see that as very positive, because the employer can actually go, oh, they've taken the time to check me out. Less so on such as Facebook and what have you, but certainly, on LinkedIn. So you get to the interview. What's wrong with being nervous? Well, absolutely nothing. I'm not going to lie, this morning I'm a bit sort of, I want to come across my best. I've done this job for 30 years, but you can still be a bit nervous. And my mouth's a bit dry, and because I want to come across my best. Still, you can still be nervous. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, and it shows that the role really means something to you. And there's nothing wrong with saying, actually, I am a bit nervous, and actually telling them. And don't worry if everybody else isn't perhaps smiling, or if you're not smiling. Try and smile if you can, like Caroline said. But if everybody isn't smiling, some interviewers can use it as a bit of a tactic, have a bit of a poker face, but actually they might be nervous too. They might not have interviewed before. They might have their boss sat right next to them, and they've been sort of like, you lead this interview, and they're like, oh my God, and they could be shaking in their own shoes. You think you're nervous, but they could be terrified as well. You have no idea what's going on at home. They could have just had screaming kids a second before they've, stepped either into a physical interview or onto Zoom. The dog might be chewing away at their door, and they're, stressed out, thinking, oh my God, I want to look professional. So, you just focus on you. Be the best person that you can be. Don't worry so much about, what's going on with them. Everybody's been nervous at some point. And more than likely they may have a few twinges of nerves themselves. So just be yourself, and make sure you show them what's different about you, because you want to be memorable. We don't know how many interviews that they'll be conducting. It could be 2, it could be 10. So just think to yourself, how can you be memorable? How can you be a bit different? And remember why you're at the interview. You know, is it because you want to grow your career? Do you want more money? Do you just want some money because you've not worked for a while? You know, do you want to do things, you know, to help your family? So just keep in mind, you know, that motivation. Why are you actually in that interview? Okay, so I have got the people. So yes, don't be afraid to. I like to actually, as an employee, as an interviewee, I like to say, how would you describe the ideal candidate? Because then it gives them a chance to actually, it gives them the chance to show you what's actually going through their mind. And who do they want? And it's going to be absolutely fresh. You know, they've got their own job description, they're there interviewing for this role. So how would they describe the ideal person that's going to join their organization? And that then, so slightly out of the order that I put on here, but ask if there's anything that you haven't mentioned that they're looking for, because they might describe the candidate and think, oh, I've done such and such, but I've not had a chance to mention it. So, and ask them, is there anything that I haven't discussed or that you're needing for the role that, you know, I haven't mentioned? And, you know, ask if they have any further questions about your experience, because, you know, it might be that they want to dig a bit deeper. I made the biggest mistake of my career about 20 odd years ago. Nothing to do with interviewing, but very relevant. I was pitching for a piece of work, massive recruitment campaign with Yorkshire Electricity, which is now Npower. And I had a bit of a template that I use, you know, very much like you might have a template CV. And part of the recruitment process for years was having big open days. And don't ask me why, but I just thought, oh, I'm not sure that they'll want to do that at the moment, or I'm not sure how well that they're working. So I actually took out the section from my tender document about an open day. And anyway, a few weeks later, we were one of 2 agencies, and they went with the other agency because they'd actually put that they held open days. And I was absolutely gutted. The campaign ran for about 3 years. There were loads of people recruited. And, you know, literally they just said, well, you didn't say anything about open days. So, you know, you don't know what this company is necessarily everything that they're looking for unless you ask them. And there might just be something that you're great at that you haven't told them. So don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to ask how you've actually done, because, you know, why not? How am I doing? How do you think I might fit with the organization? Is there anything else that I can tell you? Yeah, it's your interview as well. And so remember, you know, it is a two-way street, but also very much like Caroline said, you know, ask them what they love about the organization. Because if someone's sitting there and actually they don't look too enthusiastic, or they can't tell you a few things, you know, then you've got to, you know, it's like I said, it's your interview. Do you actually want to work there? You want to see a little bit of passion coming back, you know, from them as well. So in summary, please think about your mindset. You know, go in with a positive attitude, as in, you know, yeah, you're the right person for the role. There is no reason why you shouldn't get this role. And in fact, you might even decide it's not for you anyway, but go in thinking, I have as much chance as anybody. You know, I could be absolutely the best person for this role. And remember, the company wants you to be as great a fit as you do. You know, they don't want to waste their time. They're not there just filling in, you know, hours for the sake of it. They want you to be right. They've seen your CV. They've identified something that's jumped out at them. You know, they're thinking, yes, they want you to match up to their vision of what you might look like when they saw your CV. And remember, if you want to ask something or challenge them, then do. And actually, that will probably, you know, make you look better ultimately, because it means you're not going to just accept everything in an organization. You're going to be able to bring something different to them. You're going to be able to challenge them. You're going to be able to make them better. And remember, you're probably going to have to spend, you know, some or part of your days with these people. So, you know, make sure that you do like them and what they stand for and what they say about their organization. So just please don't leave anything in the interview. It's a two-way process. Anything that you want to ask, ask, make sure that it's right for you, and just know that you gave it your best shot no matter whatever happens, and just believe it can be yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Caroline, as well. That's given lots of food for thought, I'm quite sure. If anybody's got any questions, please remember to pop them on the chat. Is there anything come through, Lucy, before I...
There was just a couple of individual messages that I'm going to pick up separately, but nothing to the group just yet.
Okay, that's fine. I've actually got a few questions that some of the members that I've been working with in the past couple of weeks have been asking, that I thought I'll put to yourself, Caroline and Suzanne, because I'm sure it's the kind of questions that people have in general. Caroline, you mentioned in particular about the necessity and the real importance about tailoring your CV for specific job adverts. But one of the questions that I get asked, and I'm sure you do too, is it best to have one CV that you use as the kind of sort of master CV, or is it advisable to have 2 or 3 slightly different slanted CVs, especially if you're going for slightly different job roles? What's your thoughts on that?
I think you're better to have, so supposing let's use an example of an administrator, but you're applying for different sorts of roles. So maybe you were going to go for sales, and you're also thinking of marketing and maybe events. I would suggest you have 3 different CVs that highlight those skills for those different areas. The other thing that I've seen people do, and I think can be quite clever, is that you have a really huge master CV and you chunk in different areas different skills. So you say, okay, right, these are all my coordination, these are all my management, these are all my IT, or whatever. And I think that's quite clever if you're going for a real mix of varied. But if you are, sometimes we'll talk to a person and they're saying, these are my 3 areas, then I think have 3 different CVs.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. And also the other thing that comes through is, and again, I'm sure you've had it many times, is the number of applications that people put forward. I sometimes would rather see people put forward 5 really tailored specific applications for jobs that they are genuinely interested in, rather than sending out 50 of the one general CV. So being more specific. What's your thoughts? And I'll come to you, Suzanne, in a minute on this as well, because I find it really interesting if the employer picks this up, if it's just a general CV that's being sent out or if it has been tailored. But what's your thoughts, first of all, Caroline? I
just think in the current market, you've got to tailor. I just think if you don't tailor, it will get lost in transit. It's just the numbers of the people that are applying for jobs. It needs to be tailored to that role. And I think when we talk about language, Suzanne brought it up as well. If you can use the language and the experience and the tone, I think it really, really helps you to stand out. So 100% always mirror. And I also think when I start career coaching with somebody, quite often they might say to me, I've sent over 100 CVs, and I'll say to them, right, now let's stop, let's start again, and let's focus on where you really want to go. And one of the big things I like to do in my career coaching is talk about what is your real goal. If I had a magic wand and I could send you to that right career, that right place, doing that right thing, what would it be? So then your CV is in focusing on really where you want to go. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And Suzanne, from your perspective?
Yeah, well, the same again. It's interesting from the coaching side, what Caroline just said. I actually do that, with my own clients as well. What is the dream? And it's also the way I recruited. I always used to find the candidates that I thought were the closest match before sending them over. I never sent a lot of CVs. There are some companies who do like to see, quite a few CVs, but I think they're in, the minority now. I believe that when an employer is looking at a CV, they want them to be right. They don't want to wade through loads. They want someone to jump out at them and have that language. And again, I just can't stress enough about a covering letter, that because it's there, it's saying pick me, isn't it? And So, you know, just to be able to sort of say, look, you know, I've read with interest, I've seen this role, I think I can contribute, you know, because, etc., etc. So by having fewer applications, that business is saying, oh my God, this person is really interested in us. You know, let's see if they, you know, if they match up. So absolutely.
Suzanne, we've actually got a question about cover letters, so that segues perfectly. So someone's asked how long the cover letter should be, and are there any specific structures or kind of designs that they should follow?
I would personally keep it to, I mean, I'd probably pop it in a Word document if you're able to, so that it is an attachment. It could even be a long sort of intro on an email. If you're emailing a CV, for example, you could put it in the email. But I would keep it to no more than 1 page so that it holds the interest. I would have lots of gaps, so I'd make short paragraphs. So, you know, maybe 6 to 8 lines, maybe 2 to 3 paragraphs. Make it really clear and clear about the message that you're giving. So, you know, why you're sending the covering letter. I'm interested because. Use the language of the organization. Don't use it to sort of waffle on. You know, why you're sending the covering letter? Because you want to stand out. Why do you stand out? You know, it might be that you know somebody in the organization, or you've followed something that's been happening in an organization, or like I do loads with, I have 2 or 3 absolute favorite charities, hence my very bright picture, which may be distracting behind, but it's from Candlelighters. But you know, you may have something that you're really passionate about, and you've seen that, you know, that they're passionate about it. So you know, you can include something like that. So in answer, keep it short, keep it clear, make it easy to read. And you know, as Caroline said about rereading your CV, reread your cover letter to say, right, you know, am I getting the point across that I wanted to? Will the organisation know why I've written this cover letter? Will they be able to see why they should interview me and why I'm right for the role?
That's great, thank you. The next question is from Leslie. So she's asking, have CVs lost their importance as the starting point since LinkedIn has come around over this past year? I'd say following this webinar, probably they haven't lost their importance, but Caroline, if you want to jump in.
I think LinkedIn is a really, really important tool now. I really do. And I think if you need help with LinkedIn, then as a career coach, we're really, really happy to help. That's an area that we can work on, definitely. I think what I would say is you want to have both. You need both presences. You need to be able to have a CV that you can send, but you also need to have a LinkedIn presence that actually represents your CV. And if somebody had both, would not think these are 2 different people. They would get the same kind of language and style. Now, this is where it gets trickier, because you can only have one LinkedIn profile. You can't have 5, 6, 7 different ones. So it's really important that your profile on LinkedIn really represents where you're wanting to go. So it's what Suzanne and I say about that dream job. What's the real life goal? What do you really want? That's what should be on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, great. And then, so just back to the cover letter briefly. So someone's asking, if you write a cover letter, do you still need to include that summary at the beginning of your CV? Suzanne, do you want to pick that one up?
I would definitely do that, because documents can get separated. So if you rely on just a cover letter, and then, or it could be that the person who's receiving CVs gets the cover letter, reads it, thinks, oh yeah, this person's great, and then forwards your CV over to the recruiting manager, but doesn't actually forward the cover letter. So I'd say the cover letter is to get someone a bit excited, you know, like I say, pick me, pick me. And then, I mean, one thing that I did notice, particularly in IT CVs, even the most seasoned CIOs, directors, program managers, they ended up with this formulaic CV, and they all started to look the same. So, you know, I'd really sort of urge to try and make them look a little bit different. And the cover letter just kind of starts that off. It just gives you the chance to be a little bit different and be a little bit more of your personality, which you might be a little bit more scared to do in a CV.
Yeah, great. Caroline, anything to add there?
I think with Stay Nimble, we have got some really good covering letter templates. So if that is something that you're wanting to do some more work on, we can do a session or we can send you some information, but we do have some really good covering letters to help you. I'm a bit of a believer in as a recruiter, when we used to send CVs over, we would do, I suppose, the covering letter for our CVs. And I'm sure Suzanne was the same. And I would usually choose 3 things. So I would do experience of why that person's going, because they've got this experience. I would then choose their skills, so their specific skills. And then I would link something to their personality. So personality traits that mirror or same value as the company. And I used to find, you know, as a recruiter, you don't send loads of CVs. Maybe you send 5 CVs. So you'd have 5 CVs, 5 profiles. There might be other bits we would add in, but they were key areas to make sure that the CVs we were representing, that's what we had. And I still very much believe that is a really good cover letter. However, I agree with Suzanne that if you know any person there, you followed something and you've got any extra, add it in, because that's just extra brownie points.
Yeah, great. And we can include some of those cover letter templates and the resources in the follow-up emails that we send.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
I really value Caroline's opinion on this as well, in that, and we probably operated similarly. Whenever we sent a candidate to a client, it always had a really good descriptive, what we call a career profile or cover sheet on the actual CV. So if you're going through an agency, they may well be putting their opinion. Now, I was always very happy. It didn't happen very often, but I was very happy to share that with a candidate. So, you know, depending on what kind of role you're going for, I think it's, you know, be quite good to actually make the recruiter accountable and say, could you please send me what you've sent to the client? Because there might be mistakes on it. They might not be sending you in the best light. And also I can guarantee that if they know you're checking it out, they're definitely going to put a bit more effort in. So, you know, it's just a way to be a little bit different. I don't know what you think, Caroline.
Yeah, I think if you can build a good relationship with a recruiter, you're winning, because when they go for a meeting or they get a new job spec, they'll think of you. You're at the top of their head. But I think I liked building profiles with people. Suzanne, I feel like we're quite similar. So I would have sat down and interviewed someone and I'd have built a profile so that I could then put that profile and I would summarize that with someone. This is what I'm thinking I'm going to say. Can I confirm? So therefore, when I was sending it, I was always quite proud of, this is who I'm putting forward. And so if a client said, oh, I don't think that person's right, or I don't think you've got the right end of the stick, or I would then be able to come back and say, well, from our conversation, you were looking for this person's got . Now, the client might completely change their mind, because sometimes clients do, but by a good covering letter or linking in with your recruiter to really prove what you've got a much better chance of winning. And I think, if I'm really honest, because I did that big profile build, and the same as doing a covering letter, I think I got a lot more interviews, and maybe someone who was just sending CVs over, or somebody or a candidate just sending a CV over. So you know,
100%. And what used to happen a lot, well, occasionally, maybe not a lot, is that a client would come back and say, oh, you know, Suzanne, you know, the cover letter, the profile looks great, but I can't see those skills, you know, in the CV. Really, is this really true? And what had happened is, because I'd done such an in-depth interview with the candidate, I'd drawn things out which weren't necessarily, you know, in the CV. So that the profile, the extra information that you're giving, whether it's you independently or you're giving the information to a recruiter, again, it's saying, pick me. The employer's going, oh gosh, I never thought of that. I didn't realize that. I didn't see that later on in the CV. I didn't know that about the person. So again, it's just giving them, you know, the employer lots of extra information about you.
Yeah, we've just got one last question, which follows on really nicely from there, actually. Diana has asked, she's signed up to numerous daily job alerts, but she's just asking, is it better to apply for jobs via the job boards directly, or to call a recruitment agency? So is it better to apply for jobs yourself, or to work with a recruiter?
Oh, that is so difficult. Because is no right or wrong on that, really. I mean, if you, as Caroline says, if you build good relationships with recruiters, then, you know, recruiters make money by making commission, by, you know, placing people. So if you're the right person, a recruiter is always going to want to represent you.
They're going to speed it up. They've probably got the right connection in. And as an example, you can connect in with a recruiter and you could apply for the job directly. If it's the recruiter who's got the right connection to that HR person or to whoever it is, you will get in much quicker because they'll be on the phone saying, I've just seen this brilliant person, da, 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 da. But it just depends if you've got the relationship with the recruiter and the recruiter thinks that you're right. And that is the difficult question. And for Suzanne and I, that's really hard to be able to say, because we're not representing that client. And
some clients, they do want to save the money, don't they? So it's, I think if you see it roll through a recruiter, you know, go through a recruiter, it's, I mean, would you say, Caroline, nowadays, you know, that companies are doing both? They're using recruitment companies and advertising directly at the same time? They're probably
I would definitely say so. The thing I see though is I still see from my friends who work in recruitment and just from general life that if you're working with a good recruiter, they're working hard, they're working really hard at the moment, and if they think you're a good candidate, then they will go that extra mile for you. Well, when you send your CV into a client, you can't chase it up, you can't do anything. You've done it, you've done what you can do. I would say both. I think personally, as a career coach, I say to people, use recruiters, but apply to jobs as well that you want to. And I also believe contact companies that you really want to go for. And then I feel like you've covered all your options.
100% agree, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we're just coming up to the end of the hour. So if there's any more questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat, or you can email the Eventbrite link that you got, because that's got my email on it. We'll send out the ebook, the recording to this webinar, so you can rewatch it as well, and some links to some other resources for CV templates, cover letter templates, and anything else that we think would be useful. So that's it from us. I think, Jennifer, any kind of final thoughts there?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much to both Caroline and to Suzanne. I think you've given some excellent advice and hopefully lots of tips that are going to be really useful to everybody attending. Just a reminder to everybody that we do have the coaches. So if you're wanting to organise a one-to-one, you can book that through the Stay Nimble platform. So we are here to help at any point. So do get in touch. Okay, but thank you so much for attending.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.